Hello and welcome to News Central TV. I'm Darshan Usman. Here are stories making headlines beyond the continent. Let's begin with U.S. election, where the dust is settling on Donald Trump's U.S. election win. The president-elect has begun choosing who will be in his administration for his second stint in the White House. Now, Republicans are hoping to seize unified control in Washington, but the balance of the House of Representatives is still undecided. For News Central, international correspondent Afua Hagan has more.
President-elect Donald Trump is already flexing raw power, showing he may try to subvert Washington's checks and balances and leaving foreign leaders scrambling to come to terms with his victory. Early signs suggest that when he moves back into the White House in January, bolstered by a thumping win, he will act with maximum force. Trump has already issued orders on social media to Senate Republicans running in this week's Majority Leader election to endorse recess appointments for his cabinet nominees, and all three candidates quickly signaled they're open to the idea. He's showing he plans to rule a GOP monopoly on power if Republicans win control of the House with unchallenged authority. He sees Congress as a rubber stamp rather than a separate co-equal branch of government. And there are discussions in the Pentagon about how the military would respond to any order to deploy against Americans following Trump's warnings as a candidate that he could shatter taboos on the use of forces on US soil. America's allies and foes alike have spent the past 5 days speculating about what Donald Trump's re-election will mean for their economies, security and the world's grinding wars. Similar anxieties are brewing amongst diplomats gathering in Azerbaijan's capital, Baku, for the COP29 climate talks. Trump has vowed to again pull the United States from the Paris Agreement, which binds nearly all the world's countries to dramatically slash carbon pollution. Instead, he is poised to revive his drill baby drill agenda to cash in on more American oil and gas. A U-turn on US climate policy could be disastrous for the planet, as it raises the risk of emulation. When America does something on the world stage, at least some countries tend to follow. For News Central, I'm Afua Hagan.
For more on this, I'm joined by our international correspondent, Afua Hagan. Afua, what will happen in the transition this week?
Well, this week on Wednesday, Joe Biden, the current president, has invited President-elect Donald Trump to the White House for a meeting to discuss the transition of power. Now, it's not known whether Melania Trump will be joining former president and President-elect Donald Trump on that visit. She has been invited by First Lady Dr. Joe Biden. And it's worth noting that last year, time there was an election, in 2020, he didn't participate in any of these transition meetings, except any of these invitations, because he believes that the election was stolen from him. He never conceded. However, this time he has won quite convincingly. So he will be taking part in those transition meetings that start this week with President Joe Biden at the White House. And it's thought that Joe Biden will really be trying to reinforce things that he has built throughout his presidency, particularly the Ukraine and the situation there. President Joe Biden will be impressing on President-elect Trump how important it is to try and get to some sort of peace within the Ukraine and Russia within that war, which means that the Ukraine doesn't have to appease or give up its land. We don't know if that's something that Trump will agree to. But yes, that transition starts, and those transition meetings start this week at the White House in Washington, D.C.
All right. Now, but how will the undecided balance in the House of Representatives impact Trump's ability to implement his agenda?
Well, the House of Reps, those votes are still being counted. At the last count, it was 204 to the Democrats, 214 to the Republicans. Remember, the Senate, that has already been decided. So we don't know which way that's going to go. Likely that it could go to the Republicans because they are in the lead at the moment. And the long-term implications of that means that if you have the President a Republican, the Senate Republican, and the House of Representatives is Republican as well, it more or less gives Donald Trump absolute power, you could say, and that will really make the GOP very powerful, as well as the president being very powerful as well. We also know that Donald Trump has talked quite a lot about how this will be a revenge presidency. We could see some of his former foes be charged if he wants, because he will have this absolute control. Now, the Senate and House of Representatives is supposed to serve as a check and a balance for the presidency and for the party who is in charge. But if you have that absolute control from the GOP through these three elements, we may not see as many checks and balances as we have seen in the past.
All right, Afua. Now, what are the early signs of who Trump may choose for key positions in, his second administration?
Well, earlier on, we talked about that transition, and part of that transition is Trump shoring up who's going to be in his cabinet. Now, he's holed up in Mar-a-Lago in Florida, and that's become kind of a winter White House, I guess you could say. People flocking there to try and make their bid to be in this new cabinet. So far, the appointments we have heard is that the White House Chief of Staff is going to be his former campaign manager, Susie Wiles, the first female White House Chief of Staff. You are going to have Tom Homan, who's going to be the new border czar. He was an acting director of Immigration, Customs and Enforcement in the last administration. You're also going to have Jay Clayton is among the list, or on the list, for Attorney General candidates. You have Elon Musk, of course, who has been a huge support to Trump throughout his campaign. He is at Mar-a-Lago at the moment as well, practically living there. We don't know what particular position he is going to take, but we're sure that he will be offered something about the campaign. There was talks of him perhaps being in a role to do with saving money, reducing government spending. Trump has also said that Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo, who served in his former cabinet, Nikki Haley was the ambassador to the UN, and Mike Pompeo was the former Secretary of State. He said that those two people will not be serving in this Trump cabinet, that is incoming.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Afua, for speaking with us. Now, away from that, Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar has expressed concern over what he described as a very low number of arrests following last week's violent clashes in Amsterdam. Saar reported that Amsterdam's mayor informed him of a special inquiry team established to investigate the unrest. Despite this, arrest figures remain low as tensions continue following Thursday's incident after a football match between Israel's Maccabi Tel Aviv and Dutch team Ajax, which reportedly left about 30 Israeli fans injured. Now, Israel has offered investigative assistance, while Dutch police confirmed 62 arrests, saying Israeli supporters were targeted following online calls to attack Jewish individuals.
But I can tell I was informed by the mayor of Amsterdam that they formed a special inquiry team. But I can tell that until now, number of arrests is very low at all, from what I see. We suggested our help in the context of the investigation.
Meanwhile, Yemen's Huthi rebels have claimed responsibility for an attack on central Israel on Monday, following an Israeli military report that it intercepted a missile launched from Yemen. Now, the Iran-backed Houthis asserted they had conducted a military operation targeting the Nahal Sorek military base southeast of Jaffa, describing the strike as precise and reporting that it resulted in a fire. Hamas's 7 October attack on Israel resulted in 1,206 fatalities, mostly civilians, while Israel's retaliatory campaign has claimed 43,341 lives in Gaza, predominantly civilians.
نفذت القوة الصاروخية في القوات المسلحة اليمنية عملية عسكرية نوعية استهدفت قاعدة نحال سوريك العسكرية جنوب شرق يافا في فلسطين المحتلة، وكانت الإصابة دقيقة بفضل الله، ما أدى إلى نشوب حريق في محيط الموقع المستهدف. وقد نفذت العملية بصاروخ باليستي فرط صوتي فلسطين 2 وحقق هدفه بفضل الله. إن القوات المسلحة اليمنية وردا على جرائم العدو الصهيوني في غزة ولبنان سوف تواصل عملياتها العسكرية، وإن هذه العمليات لن تتوقف إلا بوقف العدوان ورفع الحصار عن قطاع غزة ووقف العدوان على لبنان.
In the Middle East, still, Hezbollah has claimed that the Israeli military has failed to occupy any Lebanese villages since launching cross-border ground operations 6 weeks ago. Now, Israeli troops began raid in southern Lebanon on September 30, following escalated airstrikes on Hezbollah targets. Now, since then, Hezbollah has stated that after 45 days of intense fighting, Israeli forces have not been able to fully occupy any village in the region. Meanwhile, Israel has aimed to secure its northern border and ensure the safety of displaced Israelis who fled due to Hezbollah's cross-border attacks. On November 3, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu outlined military objectives to push Hezbollah back and prevent the group from rearming.
והנכונות והנחישות להגן על עצמנו וגם לדרוש מאחרים לעשות את המוטל עליהם. וזה בדיוק מה שעשינו. מיד לאחר ההתקפה הנפשעת התקשרתי לראש ממשלת הולנד. הוא אמר לי שהוא מתבייש, כך הוא אמר, מתבייש, מצפה ודורש מכל ממשלה אחראית לקטוע את ההתקפות האלה באיבן. כל ממשלה אחראית נדרשת לפעול בעוצמה, בתקיפות, באופן ברור.
Still on Israel, Foreign Minister Gideon Saar has dismissed the idea of establishing a Palestinian state as an unrealistic goal amid the ongoing Gaza conflict. Speaking on Monday, Saar argued that pursuing this objective isn't feasible in the current climate and emphasized the need for a pragmatic approach. He cautioned that any Palestinian state would likely turn into a Hamas state, referring to the militant group with which Israel has been engaged in prolonged hostilities. His remarks coincided with a summit in Saudi Arabia where Arab and Muslim leaders convened to address conflicts in Gaza and Lebanon, where Israel is also facing Hezbollah, an ally of Hamas.
So to speak today about establishing Palestinian state, which will be a Hamas state. As much as we saw that it took 1 year after we withdrew from Gaza Strip to Hamas to take over the Gaza Strip, we don't want it to happen in Judea and Samaria. We must find ways how to improve I would say certain aspects that we can improve, but I don't think a Palestinian state will achieve that. And therefore, I don't think that this position is realistic today.
We'll take a break now, and when we come back, we'll tell you how delegates gather for opening ceremony of COP29. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now over to Europe, where the COP29 is currently ongoing. The UN COP29 climate conference has opened in Baku, Azerbaijan, with delegates and officials gathering for the opening ceremony and first plenary session. Now, during the event, COP28 President Sultan Al-Jaber passed the leadership to Azerbaijani Minister Mukhtar Babayev, who will lead COP29. The conference, which aims to address global climate challenges, has drawn international attention as countries look to take action on pressing environmental issues. Babayev is expected to guide the discussions and negotiate over the next few weeks, building on the outcomes of previous COP meetings. The conference marks a pivotal moment in the global effort to combat climate change, with leaders focusing on concrete solutions and commitments. In the same vein, the World Meteorological Organization, that's the WMO, has issued another climate red alert. Speaking at a press conference in Baku, Azerbaijan, as COP29 opens, WMO Secretary General Celeste Sano described the pace of climate change as alarming and raised concerns about its impact on future generations. She emphasized that the current situation is an urgent call for action, labeling it as another SOS for the planet. Now, the warning underscores the growing urgency to address climate challenges as the effects of global warming continue to intensify.
The pace of climate change in the space of just one generation is alarming. What will it look like for the next generation, for our children and our children's children? Impacts and risks. Temperatures are only part of the picture. Climate change plays out before our eyes on an almost daily basis in the form of extreme weather. This year, we saw record-breaking rainfall and flooding events and terrible loss of lives in so many countries, causing heartbreak to communities on every continent. The incredible amount of rain in Spain was a wake-up call. How much more water a warmer atmosphere can hold? Certainly, we will not give up on the 1.5 degrees. It's not possible. Simply not possible. And we have the responsibility to keep that.
Still in Europe, where French Foreign Minister Jean-Noel Barrot has urged against prejudging the future Trump administration stance on Ukraine at the Paris Peace Forum's opening. Now, addressing speculation, Barrot emphasized the need to give time for diplomatic engagement, underscoring that Ukraine has proposed a peace formula which France supports. Barrot highlighted Ukraine's openness to initiatives, provided it is directly involved, and reiterated that nothing can be done about Ukraine without the Ukrainians. He also noted Ukraine's support within the U.S. Republican Party and expressed confidence in President Zelensky's strong future relationship with President-elect Trump, affirming continued transatlantic unity on Ukraine. The Indonesian Navy disclosed last week that Russia has deployed 3 Corvette-class warships, a medium tanker, a military helicopter, and a tugboat for the exercise.
Civile. Et en particulier à l'approche de l'hiver, nous apportons un soutien à la fois humanitaire, avec l'envoi de matériel et la réhabilitation d'infrastructures énergétiques, mais aussi économique, avec la pleine mobilisation de nos entreprises. Un fonds bilatéral de 200 millions d'euros a été créé le 7 juin 2024 pour soutenir la reconstruction des infrastructures critiques ukrainiennes, et 25 projets d'investissement ont d'ores et déjà été identifiés avec la partie ukrainienne. Sur ces 200 millions d'euros, 60 millions seront consacrés aux besoins les plus urgents dans le secteur énergétique. L'Agence française de développement engage la...
Let's also tell you that Spain has announced new measures worth nearly 3.8 billion euros to help citizens recover from the worst floods in a generation that have killed 222 people. The Mediterranean storm, which struck 2 weeks ago, primarily devastated the eastern Valencia region, causing extensive damage. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez unveiled the second aid package of 3.76 billion euros to complement last week's 10.6 billion euros in aid. The measures include compensation for affected residents, property, and farmers, with 200 million euros allocated for agriculture And Sanchez has compared the efforts to the state's economic response during the COVID-19 crisis. Thousands of emergency responders are working to repair infrastructure and provide relief. Meanwhile, mass protests have erupted in Valencia over perceived mismanagement as the region braces for another storm.
Lo que estamos es en la reconstrucción, en la respuesta inmediata y en el relanzamiento de las zonas afectadas por la DANA, y posteriormente vendrá el debate político sobre qué cosas tenemos que mejorar ante esta emergencia climática y, sin duda alguna, ante la asunción de responsabilidades políticas que, evidentemente, pues tendrán que ser sustanciadas en las Cortes Generales y también, lógicamente, en el Parlamento de la Comunitat Valenciana.
A bullfighting school manager and former bullfighter, Richard Millian, voiced opposition to a proposed French law banning minors under 16 from bullfighting. Now, as the French Senate prepares to vote on the bill, Millian argued that the tradition, rooted on 200 years of practice, holds more relevance than new regulations. While he refrains from calling bullfighting a sport, he considers it a discipline which with specific rituals and codes. Millian believes the tradition offers behavioral references and laments that critics often lack understanding of bullfighting's culture's significance.
Et nous, on ne demande rien à personne, on va rester chez nous et continuer à perpétuer ce qu'on a fait avant. On ne compte pas l'exporter au Japon, ni aux États-Unis, ni en Russie. On veut qu'on nous foute la paix et qu'on nous laisse vivre notre passion et notre façon de faire. Sinon, c'est très simple.
Ces gens qui veulent interdire la corrida, ils savent pas ce que c'est en fait. Eux, ils voient pas l'art que c'est et l'émotion que ça nous procure à nous. Du coup, il vaut mieux d'abord qu'ils aillent voir ce que c'est et après qu'ils nous interdisent. Et puis,
Mais bien sûr, il est évident que l'éducation et l'approche de l'animal, plutôt des enfants à l'animal, est évident que c'est prépondérant. Un enfant, quand on est petit, on aime les animaux, c'est viscéral, on aime. Mais après, petit à petit, tellement encouragé, tellement valorisé, la torture est valorisée, alors les enfants ne savent plus trop.
And that's all at this hour. But before we go, you can actually watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I'm Darshan Usman.